Siamo giunti a questo secondo appuntamento. Io, Francesco Rea dell'Agenzia Spaziale Italiana, sono qui per darvi il benvenuto. Do il benvenuto a tutti quanti ci stanno seguendo, do il benvenuto anzi alla padrona di casa Marlene Nice, a cui poi passerò la parola e che gestirà l'incontro di oggi, un incontro molto importante con il direttore della Stazione Spaziale Internazionale Scimemi, a cui do il benvenuto in Italia. Welcome in Italy, Mr. Scimemi. Fatemi solo ricordare il significato di questo incontro voluto dall'ambasciata statunitense, Missione USA in particolare, che ha voluto condividerlo con l'Agenzia Spaziale Italiana. Noi siamo stati molto felici e abbiamo subito iniziato a lavorare per momenti come questi. Sono momenti in cui ovviamente siamo tenuti a stare a casa per preservare noi stessi. Non è una situazione italiana, è una situazione di tutto il mondo. In questo momento, fatemi anche dire, gli Stati Uniti in particolare stanno vivendo una situazione molto difficile, quella che noi abbiamo vissuto in queste settimane, e dobbiamo dire loro appunto in bocca al lupo come loro hanno fatto con noi. Questo stare a casa però significa anche andare avanti, continuare nelle nostre attività, approfittare delle opportunità virtuali che ci dà la nuova tecnologia che si è sviluppata in questi 20 anni e che probabilmente 20 anni fa non avremmo potuto usufruire per le stesse occasioni, per imparare qualcosa in più e soprattutto per parlare tra paesi lontani. In questo momento, in questo caso, il nostro ospite è degli Stati Uniti, sta a Houston, se non sbaglio, e detto questo io non posso che ringraziare Marlene Nice, a cui do la parola per introdurre il nostro ospite. Grazie a tutti.
Hi, everyone. I'm going to switch over to English now. Our program today will be in English. So I'm Marlene Nice. I'm with the U.S. Embassy in Rome. I'm the Deputy Cultural Affairs Officer. And the U.S. Embassy is really happy to be joining with the Italian Space Agency and NASA to bring this series of programs from home to space. We know it's a challenging time, difficult to do programs and to keep in touch with our Italian audiences, but we're really glad we have this technology so we can bring this to you. I do want to give my condolences to all the families of victims of coronavirus and know that the U.S. Embassy is working with Italy, the U.S. government is working with Italy to help through this crisis. So now I'd like to introduce our speaker for today. Sam Scimemi is the director of the International Space Station at NASA headquarters. He's responsible for ensuring safe and productive onboard operations and implementing policies and programs. A leader in human space flight issues for 30 years, Mr. Scimemi regularly engages with the White House and Congress, as well as International Space Agency leaders around the world. Hey, for students who are tuning in today as part of our audience, and if you're interested in this type of career, I just wanted to mention that Mr. Scimemi has a Bachelor of Science degree in mechanical engineering. So I hope that you'll enjoy the program. I hope you find it informative and that it will spur some new ideas and creativity. And now I'll turn the microphone over to Mr. Scimemi. Oh, don't forget, after the program, we're going to be giving some questions to Mr. Scimemi, so please type them in the chat on the YouTube channel, and I'll be taking them off of there.
All right, thank you very much. First, I'd like to thank the U.S. Embassy in Roma and the Italian Space Agency as well for hosting this and putting this on. I've done this several times now in Italy and around the world, and I'm really happy to do this. I'd also like to express my sympathies and condolences as well to the families that have been affected and by this virus, not only in Italy, but also in other countries that have maybe listening to this as well. So I'd like to get started. My presentation today is from the ISS to the Moon and Mars. Oops, let's see. Now, is that being shared? Elena, can you see this? Anyone?
No.
No?
Oh, I don't yet. Stephen, you have the PowerPoint up?
Yeah, it's up. here. Share. This worked yesterday. Oh, here we go. I see it now. Okay. Now, can you see me? See the screen?
I see it. Looks
All right.
great.
Yes, it's okay.
Okay, that's not the presentation. All right, this is the presentation. All right. And folks see this now?
It's fine.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, again, my presentation today is about human spaceflight and the particulars about how NASA and its international partners with the International Space Station are doing the research and technology development to get us from where we are today with the ISS to the moon and then eventually to Mars. First, I'd like to highlight Spot the Station app. Space Station, as many of you know, goes around the Earth 16 times a day. And in this coming week will be, for Italy, a very good opportunity to see the space station as it flies over Italy in the early hours of the morning and late in the evening hours. These are times for Rome. However, these times will be similar to other cities in Italy. If you go to the website, you can put your city name in there and it'll give you the exact times. Now, the way you read this is starting from the date, say the first line for today, on Saturday, this is from last week. Oh my gosh, I built this too long ago. So the way you read this is that the length of the pass is next, say from the bottom of it on Monday, that was last night. The angle of the pass from the horizon would be 50 degrees, and where it starts from is 37 degrees above west, and the pass ends at 11 degrees above southeast. So if you go to the website and put your city name in, you'll be able to get all the information. All right, so many people may be familiar with this photograph. This was taken on Apollo 8 as the astronauts flew around the moon from the dark side to the light side, and the Earthrise came up. And this is as far as we have been as humans from the Earth. Now, the moon is about 386,000 kilometers from the Earth. So that's as far as we've been so far with people. And this is what the Earth looks like from Mars. Now, of course, this isn't taken by people. This is taken by one of the Mars rovers. It's really far. The Earth is just a speck in the sky. It's not even as bright as you would see a planet like Venus or Mars from Earth. And Mars is 228 million kilometers from the Earth. And that by itself, just the distance, creates a lot of issues for human health and performance that we'll get into. So the first thing is the 5 hazards of human spaceflight. These are the hazards that deal with human physiology, psychology, and cognitive effects. You see those on the right. And the 5 areas that affect human performance is, first of all, the distance from Earth with communication delays that could be up to 40 minutes round trip of comm delay, autonomous medical care, and no emergency evacuation. Once you get past the Earth-Moon system, the gravity field Earth-Moon system, there's no coming back, and it takes 2 to 3 years to get to Mars and to come back. Next one is isolation and confinement, behavior aspects of isolation, which we're all experiencing now, and also the effects of that in sleep disorders, and this has also been noticed as well. A hostile closed environment has to do with the vehicle design, the environment, the CO2 levels, the toxic exposures, and the microbes that grow inside human spacecraft. And then, of course, food and nutrition. Radiation effects also affect not only the solar radiation, but the galactic cosmic radiation. And altered gravity fields. In space and in free flight, there's basically zero gravity, but then if you go to the moon and Mars, you have fractions of gravity, and what is the effect on the vestibular system, fluid shifts, and other areas like that. And my slides won't advance. Huh. Can you still hear me?
Yes, very well.
Okay, there we go. All right, got them to advance. All right, so where we are today with the International Space Station, we're basically car camping in space. We're physically tied to the Earth through the transportation system we have for space station. Our transit time is about 2 days, 1 day to get there and 1 day to get back. Our communications are near real time. We have frequent crew exchanges 4 times a year. We have crew supplies and logistics approximately 7 to 8 times a year. We have modified hardware that we fix on the Earth and refly to the space station. We have crew samples and atmospheric samples that come down from the space station and are brought down to the Earth for analysis. Crew blood and urine and the water system and the air samples all come back to the Earth for analysis. We also have emergency crew return at any time during flight. And we have a very neat way of getting rid of trash is that we burn it up in the Earth's atmosphere. Now going to Mars, it's basically independent life. There will be no connections back to the Earth. And the transit time, as I said before, is 2 to 3 years transit time. And unlike space station, where it's only 400 kilometers from the surface, the average distance to Mars is 228 million kilometers. And the only link that we have is communications. And that communications link can be up to 40 minutes. So you can think of it like the only way to communicate would be texting. No real-time communications on the way to Mars. So what are we doing to close these gaps, not only in the physical distance, but all in human physiology, all our systems that keep the crew alive, and things of that nature? Well, it all starts with the International Space Station here in low Earth orbit and the 5 international partner space agencies that participate on the program, including the United States, Canada, Japan, Russia, and many countries of the European Union. So first thing that we're doing is performing the health research and developing the countermeasures to keep humans alive and healthy on long duration space missions. If you look at the picture on the right, there is something that we call ARED. It's a very large exercise machine. It's been known for several years that astronauts lose bone mass and have muscle atrophy in zero gravity. So the way we countermeasure that is with a lot of exercise. The crew exercises about 2 hours per day, every day for 6 months or even longer. In the case of Scott Kelly, who was there for a year. So you basically have to be a gym rat to be able to sustain your health in space. Also, you look to the left, you have an astronaut who is taking blood samples, and those blood samples will be then frozen and then brought back to the Earth to see how healthy the astronauts are. And we're developing the countermeasures for all those things, those 5 hazards of human spaceflight. This next chart represents all the risks we have in all those areas. And basically the way you read this chart is that red is that we don't have a countermeasure and the risk is very high to the astronaut's health. Yellow means that we have some countermeasures to mitigate the risk, and green indicates, hey, we actually now understand this and we have countermeasures to reduce the risk of disease or injury or psychological effects to the astronauts. If you take just one of these, let's go to, let's see, this one, in-flight medical conditions. Basically, this is procedures and tools and systems to actually perform medical evaluation and medical activities in space. So you see back in this year, we're hoping that we've learned enough that we have new systems to be able to field those on board the space station and then convert that into a green risk, and that we now know how to use those systems. And when it turns to blue, that means we don't need any more research or more activities in that area. And we track this year to year, and we also work with our international partners on this. We have many of the international partners also participate with NASA in doing the research and doing all the utilization activities on board the ISS in human health and performance. The next most important thing is demonstrating the life support and monitoring systems that will take us to the moon and Mars. The system on board space station is quite complex. It has to do everything that the Earth does for us today. The Earth provides us water, it provides us air, it provides a moderate temperature for us to live in. All that has to be actually done by machines on board the space station. This particular piece of equipment is our carbon dioxide removal system. And for those of you who are mechanical engineers or are industrial engineers, this is a fantastic piece of equipment as far as engineering. One of the problems with this piece of equipment, however, it used desiccant beds to remove the carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. One reason that we test in space is that these systems don't always work the same way in space. So on the ground, these desiccant beds generate dust, and the dust falls to the bottom of the canisters and does not recirculate within the system because of gravity. On Earth, we found out that this dust ends up circulating throughout the entire system. All this plumbing, it ended up circulating through all these valves and switches and the like, and caused malfunctions in the system. So that was something we learned in orbit about the carbon dioxide removal system that we would have not learned on the ground. And of course, we're developing modified systems, so the dust systems does not affect the systems anymore. This chart is just to really just show you how complex it is to keep a crew alive. If you look up in the left center at the top, there we have a depiction of the crew. And the closest things to the crew you will see is crew food, water, and hygiene. This obviously everyone needs to eat and be able to drink water to survive. And the next thing that's most important is to get rid of crew waste. Getting rid of crew waste is also an essential thing. If the toilet breaks on board space station, we have 2 of them, and soon we'll have 3. That's the first thing that the crew members actually fix above everything else. We take the crew waste and we recover water from the crew waste, and we then turn that into drinkable water, and then we also turn that into oxygen through the atmospheric management system. As you can see through this simplified diagram, all these systems, you look to the right, the crew systems, the waste management system, temperature and humidity control, the water system, environmental control, air system, and of course the EVA systems, the extravehicular activities systems. These are all complex systems that require years of development and testing, not only on the ground, but also in space, to ensure that when we do go to the moon and Mars, these systems actually work the way we expect them to work. Next is learning how to break the bonds of the Earth. If you remember on the previous slide, we had all the linkages between the space station and the Earth, all the logistics, crew health monitoring. We have to learn how to break all those bonds. We have to learn how to do test blood and air samples and urine samples on board our spacecraft in space, and not have the samples come down, because when we go to the moon and Mars, those samples will not be coming back anytime soon. You can also see how it looks like on board the space station when a cargo vehicles docks to the space station. Most everything is in what's called these crew bags. And they're just basically soft-sided suitcases, basically. And you can see how all the clothes, everything the crew needs, toothbrushes, toothpaste, and everything like that is all labeled. It's all tracked with barcodes, and the crew has to take care that they know where to put all this equipment and all these supplies, and the ground keeps very close tabs on them on where they actually put them, so they can assist the crew from the ground case they lose something and don't forget where they put it. This is a huge effort. Also, all these crew bags and plastic bags, see this plastic bag right here and here and here, those end up being trash. And today on Space Station, we get rid of that trash by putting it back into the cargo vehicle when it leaves, and it burns up on its return. When we go to the Moon and Mars, we won't have those systems to come back and burn that up. So we're looking at taking these plastic bags and other non-reusable soft goods and converting them and recycling them into other uses like 3D printing and other things like that. Again, food and nutrition. The system we have today is actually set up to support the crew members that are there for about 6 months. And as many as you know, the food that we have today, that the way it's prepared, only maintains its nutritional value for a handful of months. So the food that we have on Space Station is eaten through about every 6 months, and we bring up new food all along the way. Now, going to the Moon and Mars, I want you to see something. What's peculiar about space stations that we're so close to Earth, there's lots of fresh fruit. You see the oranges here. They're not going to be getting fresh fruit going to Moon or to Mars. It's all going to be pre-packaged. You see the packages here on the table. This is in the service module on the Russian side. You can see all the packaging. Another thing about space flight is that your taste buds and your taste changes. And it's particular to each astronaut. Many astronauts find that taste, the taste senses are dulled in space because of the fluid shift in your head and in your sinus cavities. You'll see a bottle of sriracha here, right here on the left. The astronauts like to put sriracha or Tabasco sauce on just about everything in order to enhance the taste. Also in the upper right, you can see Luca Parmitano, fellow Siciliano. He was up there from the summer of last year, and he came down in February this past year, if you were watching the last Soyuz landing. So go on to the next slide. So I've explained what's it like to be to do the research and what we're doing on Space Station, and then going to Mars. There's this huge gap between what we're doing in car camping and Space Station to independent life. So what are we doing? In comes the Artemis program, and what's relevant about Mars on the way to what's relevant about the Moon on the way to Mars. As you know, we've reinitiated our lunar development program to land astronauts on the Moon, and then to use the Moon as a test bed. So why is the Moon such a good test bed? Well, first of all, the distance problem I talked about earlier. Station's only at 400 kilometers, the Moon 386,000 kilometers, and Mars 228 million kilometers. So our rocket and propulsion technologies have to be designed, and the performance has to suit those distances. Also, the ability to keep humans healthy and alive without resupply and immediate return to Earth. Again, no immediate emergency return. So we have to learn how to live out in space without a quick return. Demonstration ability of humans to live and work outside the protection of Earth's magnetic field. Basically, this has to do with the galactic cosmic radiation. There are no countermeasures for this type of radiation. So we'll be doing research at the Moon in lunar orbit with the Gateway, and then on the lunar surface on what that really means to long-term human performance. Also from a lunar lander systems and lunar rover systems, learning how to do that on the Moon is very advantageous, since those same systems will be needed at Mars. The Moon also holds volatiles, or what we call volatiles, which is basically water and other complex molecules, and those could be used for fuel and oxygen. Of course, we always do science along the way, just like we're doing on space station. And to wrap that all up, it's just basically an incremental step in sending humans beyond low Earth orbit, and provides an opportunity for international cooperation based on the ISS partnership that we have today. So, brief description on Artemis. If the way you read this, you start from the left-hand side with the Earth, and with Artemis 1 to be flown in a couple of years. That Artemis 1 will be a uncrewed mission to the moon and to circle the moon and come back. Next, a couple of years later, will be Artemis 2, will be our first crewed mission around the moon. To prove that we can keep astronauts alive for the about a week-long mission to the moon and back. The next things we're doing is actually building what we call a gateway around the moon in lunar orbit for us to be able to aggregate all our lunar surface capabilities in lunar orbit before we actually go to the moon, to be able to check the systems out and to be able to aggregate them. This program is also a part of our international partnership discussions as we go forward in filling out what we're doing with the Artemis program. Then you see on the lunar surface, we also have programs to start flying our commercial lunar payload services program, which NASA will pay companies to deliver cargo and instruments to the lunar surface robotically. We also have the human side of this, where we're developing the human landing system, which will get us to the lunar surface by 2024. And that's the first phase. The second phase is how we take what we start with and then evolve it to Mars, which is here on the right. So basically the gateway system is expanded, and we have the opportunity to use the gateway to actually close more human health and performance risk in deep space on the way to Mars. When we get the Mars transit system here, you see a depiction of it here, a large habitat, which we will build at the gateway and then leave gateway in lunar orbit on the way to Mars. Meanwhile, on the lunar surface, we are developing and testing the capabilities that we will eventually lead on the Mars surface, such as lunar terrain vehicles and habitable mobility platform, pressurized platforms, and power systems and the like that we would eventually need on Mars. So you can see this is a very incremental step, going from where we are on space station to doing the research and do all the testing. And we will actually validate all those systems we're doing from a human health and performance standpoint at the gateway in lunar orbit and on the lunar surface. And so we'll be able to learn how could we do all those things to have basically independent life on the way to Mars and back. And with that, that's all I have.
Okay. Thanks, Sam, so much. I love this presentation. It was so interesting, and we have a lot of questions. So let me get to a couple of them right away. From Angelique Verrecchia, she asked two things. She wants to know, who are the international partners? And she said in regards to human risks. And the other question she had is, do you think we could achieve a trip to Mars during our lifetime?
Definitely, let's address the last one first. Yes, that's my intention anyway, is to be able to get to Mars in our lifetime. I don't know how old she is, but certainly in my lifetime, I hope. We're hoping to be able to do that in the early, hopefully be able to start in the early 2030s, our first missions to Mars. She talked about the ISS partners. So the ISS partners, of course, NASA, the Canadian Space Agency, Japanese Space Agency, the Russian Space Agency, Roscosmos, and the European Space Agency, where most of the ESA participants are included, but not all. Of course, Italy is a major participant, along with France and Germany, Spain, and a whole bunch of other ESA countries as well. And the risk. She had a specific question about the risk. From a high level, what I would say is that the biggest risks are to the cardiovascular system, your heart system, right? Your nervous system. Those are the physical risks, but you also have risks associated with your sociology type of interactions, having been into a closed space for 2 or 3 years. Think about what we're going through today. People living in apartments or homes, and you get a lot more space on the ground than you will in space. We're expecting that a crew of 4 will only have something like 100 cubic meters to live in for 2 to 3 years. So that's another big area of research that we're doing with all the international partners.
I think that the people on the International Space Station could give us some lessons about being shut-ins and how to manage our time when we're limited this way.
In fact, Scott Kelly did an interview just on that, and if you search for that on the web, you will actually see his response to all those types of questions.
We'll have to do that. Okay, another question comes from Jose Salgado. He wants to know, do we need to bioengineer our bodies to achieve interplanetary travel?
Well, I'm not sure about interplanetary travel, but for going to Mars, which again is only 2 to 3 years away, we believe that we will have enough information and have done enough research to not to have to go down the path of, quote, bioengineering. We know what countermeasures we need to get to Mars. I think the bioengineering part is more of a long-term aspect of spaceflight that we really haven't addressed very much at all.
Okay, this comes from someone named Altine, and I'm not even going to try to pronounce this last name. And he says, or she says, in 2017, NASA posted on deep space optical communications with FLTs, plan to develop to TRL-6. Do you know if this will be used for Artemis and/or Mars missions? That sounds like a lot of code there.
Yeah, so he's basically talking about laser-based communications, and NASA is assessing right now the technology readiness for all those systems. Again, back to space station, we're going to be testing those type of systems at space station to raise the TRL, the technology readiness level, basically. TRL-1, if you will, is the lowest level, like there's only research about a particular technology. TRL-10 is, hey, it's already been flight proven in space, and then you can use it commercially. So we're trying to test this technology, which is in the 6 to 8 level range, and test it on not only space station but other spacecraft, and then to see how that would be applicable to using for Artemis. Obviously, we want to be able to use the latest technology, especially in high definition video, and to use those very heavy data driven systems. We will likely need laser based communications.
Well, while we're talking about that, Jose Salgado asks, is it financially viable for agencies to support the ISS and Artemis at the same time?
Sure. In fact, it's not even practical to only support one or the other. If you don't do the research and continue to have research in low Earth orbit, we're not going to Mars. And we're not going to go to the moon either. So actually, it's imperative that we actually fund both. Furthermore, going to the moon will only be maybe once a year. That's not very exciting, actually, if you only go once a year and you only go to Mars once every 5-6 years. So low Earth orbit and ISS and any follow-on platform provides us the opportunity to keep humans in space long term, and for us to continue to do the research and technology development that'll get us to Mars and beyond.
Okay. Fabiana Milta asks, what is going to happen to the ISS after 2024?
So right now in the United States, our Congress has a couple of proposed bills that would extend station to at least 2030. And many of our international partners has expressed to us that they would like to continue the space station beyond 2024. We also have a national policy here in the US that the United States will be in low Earth orbit basically indefinitely. Whether that's on space station or another commercial platform, NASA will basically always be in low Earth orbit. We are right now developing the supply and demand system on the commercial side to be able to replace space station at some point once it's beyond its end of life. And so the fate of space, and the direct answer to your question is that we don't know quite yet. But we're hopeful that our Congress will act soon this year, and then all of our international partners will follow suit.
Okay, thank you. Veronica Moronese asks, on disposal of waste, since there's an obligation to safeguard the space environment, has it been taken into consideration what could be the environmental impact caused by a permanent station?
Well, basically, we have a permanent station today with the ISS. And the trash, as I said earlier, is taken out of the space station and put into the cargo vehicles, and it's burned up in the atmosphere. There is no, if you will, residual waste left after all that happens. Now, around space station, in station's orbit, there are micrometeoroid debris fields, not only from human-created debris, but also micrometeoroids, and that is managed very closely at the space station. Again, with ISS and low Earth orbit, we have a way to get rid of the trash that station generates. For other spacecraft, it's not as easy if they are deploying different appendages or other systems that stay in space a long time, that takes years for them to deorbit. On space station, they are deorbited in a day, very quickly.
Okay, next question from Pasquale Scognamiglio. He says, so we have to use the moon in order to arrive in Mars?
Yes, that's our plan. And not only the lunar surface, but also lunar orbit with the gateway and eventually the Mars transit system. This will be our next step beyond low Earth orbit into deep space, basically outside the Van Allen radiation belts. And that's where we're going to learn how to do things like remote docking, keeping the crew alive without having all the connections back to the Earth. So yes, it's definitely necessary for us to take the next steps beyond low Earth orbit.
And Emanuela Palumba asks, according to you, can men one day colonize Mars?
I think that will probably not, I mean, my personal opinion, that will probably not happen in my lifetime. I think it's possible, but I'd like to emphasize something. Mars is not a vacation spot. Mars is trying to kill you, along with the moon and along with space. The near absolute vacuum of space is trying to kill you. The lunar surface, being in a vacuum, is trying to kill you. The lunar dust is trying to kill you. When you get to Mars, the atmosphere is Mars, mostly carbon dioxide. Well, that's trying to kill you too. And so is the Mars soil is also trying to kill you. So it's like trying to live permanently on the sea. It takes a lot of technology. And if you happen to go into the sea on your own for hours or days or weeks and months, well, in the sea is also trying to kill you as well. So humans really like land. Humans really like land. We like living on the surface of land. We have everything that we need. We have the food, we have air, we have water, we have our homes, we have recreation. there's no beach at Mars. There's no things of that nature. There's no sailing. There's no swimming. There's no going to the mall, at least for the time being.
So Raffaele Minichini asks, will the ISS be converted into an orbiting hotel or something like that in the near future? How about the ISS as a vacation spot?
Well, it has already been a vacation spot for some spaceflight participants that have flown with the Russians on Soyuz. We've had quite a few space tourists who've stayed on station several days, and they were basically tourists. And they did their own thing on board the space station. We also have a program here in the United States as well, when we get commercial crew flying, that we're also going to allow on the US side tourists, if you will, on board the space station. So it will become a sort of hotel, at least for a small number of people.
That's interesting. So apologies again if I mispronounce anyone's name. Yoshi Mohanty asks, when space programs are treated as high security programs, how is international cooperation sought to be achieved to achieve this scenario?
Well, with the International Space Station, it's governed by what's called the Intergovernment Agreement, that all the participating countries that participate on the space station has signed, and we actually share technical information about how to safely operate and manage the space station from all the partners. So though it is high security in the sense that no, the technical information for command and control, for telemetry and all that is not available in the public. Everything that we do on space station from all the partners is a lot of it is publicly available. In fact, NASA's websites are full of public information about technical performance, all the research that we're doing. So on space station, we've solved that problem through the intergovernment agreement on how we would cooperate, and expect that we will have similar agreements with our partners as we go forward to the moon and Mars.
Okay, here's a question from Hikmat Tahini Rajad. How do you deal with budget risks of this big project? Is there any robust commitment for providing a budget for such a long-term goal?
So space station was actually started in 1984. So we've had consistent, if not strong support, at least in the United States, for space stations since 1984. So that's a very long time. And most human spaceflight programs, the more complex ones, have lasted, like shuttle lasted for 30 years. We expect space station to last similarly, and same thing with the moon and Mars. This takes long-term commitment from participating agencies. Human spaceflight is not an easy thing. It is quite a bit more expensive than doing robotic programs, but human spaceflight is very inspirational to people. It gives people hope around the world. And besides, nobody wants to grow up to be a robot, I don't think. At least not in my family.
Okay. Filippo Drapero asks, what substances can be obtained from the moon? I've heard about helium-3. What is its usefulness?
I don't know much about the helium-3, but I do know about the other volatiles like water that's on the moon. We believe through the spacecraft that have orbited the moon that there is quite a bit of lunar ice, especially in the South Pole area. That could be used for fuel, to fuel propulsion systems, could also be used for providing water and oxygen to the crew on the lunar surface. So that's probably the major one, but we don't have any ground truth yet, and that's one of the purposes of our lunar commercial landing program, is to be able to do the research on the lunar surface to see if water is actually there in large quantities, and then how could we actually use it?
Okay, Piero Messidoro asks, where are we today in terms of radiation protection?
So on board the space station, we're inside the Van Allen belts, which gives us quite a bit of protection on space and here on Earth, by the way, through the atmosphere for galactic cosmic radiation. It also provides some level of solar radiation protection as well, but we get quite a bit of solar radiation above the atmosphere on space station. So basically, we know how to protect against solar radiation. It's a matter of materials, about thickness of materials. I'll just give you an example. Water happens to be a very good solar radiation protection system. Today, when there are solar flares or high solar activity, we ask the crew to go into the densest part of space station, which is actually the Soyuz vehicles, to basically ride out any high-level solar activity. And we will be able to do that the same way going to the moon and Mars. What we don't have protection for outside the Van Allen belts is galactic cosmic radiation, the very high energy particles, heavy particles that circulate throughout the galaxy. And that's the area of research we will be doing. Currently, we do some level of that on board the space station, but we'll also be doing that when we go to the moon and on the way to Mars. And we also have, we're developing countermeasures on how to deal with galactic cosmic radiations, though there's no, quote, protection against it.
Okay. Sahana Shastri says, I am a communications master's student. What should I pursue further to contribute to fixing some of these large delays?
Well, you can't fix the large delays because it's physics. You can't go faster than the speed of light. Though on Star Trek and many other sci-fi movies, they do go faster than the speed of light. But today, our physics our understanding of physics does not allow us to go at the speed of light. So there's a common misconception that, quote, laser communications is faster than radio communications. Well, it just so happens that radio communications travel at the speed of light. So we can't get any faster, and it's just a matter of distance. The distances are so great that we'll just have to live with the communication delays. But one way you could contribute, though, is to build tools, to be able to build tools for the crew and the ground to communicate in that delayed environment. So that is an area that you certainly could contribute to.
Okay. Darius Apollo asks, what about a gateway station around Venus? Is there any long-term program from NASA or the Italian Space Agency?
Not that I'm aware of. The Venus is and the orbit that it is in is very hot, and it requires special protection from the sun's radiation and its heat. If you read recently about the solar probes that we just sent to the sun, there was a lot of coverage about the special solar deflectors or solar insulation that those spacecraft had to protect the spacecraft from the sun. Around Venus, it'd be difficult for humans to stay any length of time around Venus, though we have had spacecraft go to Venus as well. There are some scenarios to come back from Mars that you do a Venus flyby to quickly come back to the Earth, to more quickly come back to the Earth. And those spacecraft, if they were to do that, would require solar thermal protection to survive those orbits.
Okay. Jose Salgado asks, besides space tourism and experiments, what are other incentives for private investors to support the ISS?
Well, one thing we're investing in, additional to the private astronaut abilities, is also in-space manufacturing. To be able to manufacture things in space that can only be made in space. So NASA is partnering with several companies that are looking at manufacturing fibers, unique fibers for communication and other purposes. We're also looking at bioprinting organs in space as well for the medical industry. When you bioprint organs on the Earth, by themselves, just the cells themselves, the cells collapse because of gravity. And on Earth, you have to put sort of a skeletal structure in place and print the cells on the structure. In space, we have found that when you do bioprinting in space, these cells naturally grow into a spherical organoid, if you will, just like they do in fetuses here on the Earth. So that's also an area of promising research that we're doing on space station. And if those areas actually pan out, this is areas that private investors might be very interested in investing in.
Okay, so we have a question from BIS Italia, the Italian branch of the British Interplanetary Society. Only on Mars do we have evidence of vast deposits of nearly pure water ice. What will happen to the lunar program if there's no ice on the moon?
So our lunar program is not based on a productive use of water on the moon. We have lots of other technology lots of technology objectives on the moon and in lunar orbit to get us to Mars, like being able to build human-scaled landing systems, human-scaled rover systems, and to be able to keep astronauts healthy and alive on a foreign body. So our program is not based on utilizing water. If it is there, our program is independent of that, though we would like to use the water, but if not, that will not stop us from going to Mars.
Okay, maybe another couple of questions will come in, but right now I was wondering if there were any things that they're using on the International Space Station that have become things that we use in our daily lives, maybe some inventions that we never thought of that came from there.
Well, so we are doing research on something that's called dusty plasma. And this was an experiment between the European Space Agency and the Russian Space Agency in researching plasma effects in space. Well, what they found out is that this, what's called, dusty plasma, is that it actually aids healing in human skin. Apparently, it reproduces molecules that are similar to the human immune system, and you can apply this dusty plasma, if you will, on skin, and it advances human healing of cuts and other things like that, infections and the like, very rapidly. And that's not available yet on the market, but this is one area that eventually will become available to people here on Earth. Another example, a long-term example that we've known for some time now, is our robotic software system that the Canadian Space Agency and NASA developed together. That software is actually the basis for the software that's being used in robotic surgeries today. On space station, the Canadian arm, as many people may know, is a very large piece of equipment, and we put limits on how fast it can move and where it can move. And those kinds of software that has now been applied to robotic operations here on Earth for surgeries, brain surgeries, and others to assist the doctors performing surgery, where before it was completely up to the surgeon skill itself to do the tumor surgery and the like. But now those can actually be programmed so the doctor operating the robotic equipment doesn't damage other tissues around, say, removing a tumor in the brain.
Wow.
That's just two examples.
Okay, Luigi Mauro asked, in my opinion, more than getting to Mars, one of the biggest challenges is to ensure the people who go there can come back. How far are we from having the right propulsion systems that can take off from Mars?
We have the technology basically today. What we have not done is do the engineering to build the systems. With a combination of of chemical propulsion and electric propulsion that we have today, we can basically go to Mars and come back in 2 years, in 2 to 3 years. So we think that is possible with the technology today. Now, we certainly have not built those systems today. It would take a lot of effort to build the Mars transport system, not only from the propulsion system, but also from the habitation system. Both those systems are about 40 metric tons in mass. So that's 40 metric tons in space for a propulsion system is quite large, which we have not done before. So I would say we have the technology, close to the technology today. It's just a matter of doing the engineering and doing the manufacturing and getting it launched.
Okay, Sahana Shastri asked, of all the challenges you mentioned in your wonderful presentation, have the phase plans been made with the assumption that we will have solutions to all of these problems? Communication, health, by 2024.
Yeah, so the engineering solutions to landing on the moon and building systems for the crew to be healthy, we believe we have enough of the knowledge today to build those systems now, and that's what we're doing today. And the human health and performance side, we do not have all the research completed yet, but by the late 2020s and the late 2020s, we hope to have all the research and all the countermeasures necessary for us to be able to go to Mars.
Okay, and this is our last question from Fatoumata Kebe. She says, what advice would you give to someone who wants to be an astronaut?
Well, be prepared for quite a bit of hard work. When I was going to school, I saw all my friends, I would say, go to different degrees, and they were having a lot more fun than I was having in being in engineering school. So that's one part, is hard work, getting through engineering and having the discipline to do it. But what I would say is that pick something you're passionate about. Pick something that you dream about, that makes you happy. Have that dream and go follow that dream. Now, what I will tell you is that what's important is not necessarily engineering or biomedicine and things of that nature. What makes you happy is what kind of environment do you like to work in? What kind of environment do you want to have your friends? If you're in computer science and you don't like being around a lot of people who are like you, well, that might not be such a good career, because you'll be spending a lot of your career working with other computer scientists. Also, what I would say is that follow your dream, but also have a backup plan. Know something else about who you are and what else would make you happy. For instance, to be an astronaut, it's very few people that actually get to be an astronaut. And you ask about any astronaut, they'll tell you is have a backup plan. It's very competitive and the like. And even to work in the space agencies or in industry, in the aerospace industry, there's a lot of competition to work in industry and at NASA and the Italian Space Agency and the like, because they hire so few people compared to like the banking industry or the other manufacturing industries. So space is a bit of a boutique industry, I would say, not only from an engineering standpoint, but also from a science standpoint as well.
Sam, this was all so interesting. Thanks everyone who joined us today. Thank you, Mr. Scimemi, for taking time out of your busy schedule to meet with us virtually. And we look forward to when you can come here and visit us again in Italy. Francesco, did you have something you wanted to add?
My congratulations to Mr. Scimemi, a really passionate presentation, so understandable. And I'm very happy to be here in this occasion. Thank you to you and to your collaborators.
Okay, well, so join us again on Thursday. We'll have another program from home to space. Sam, any last words?
Well, it was a real pleasure. It was a real pleasure to be here today, and hopefully I'll be back in Italy sooner than later, and we can do this all over again.
We look forward to it. Bye, everyone. Thanks again for coming.
Thank you. Bye.